I stood frozen in the hallway, one hand pressed against the wall, the other clutching a wedding magazine. From the other side of the door, I heard voices I didn't want to hear. She'll pay for everything, just like she did for the first wedding. Violet's laughter. My parents' laughter. My stomach twisted into a knot. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, so loud I could barely think. The blood drained from my face. Even though it wasn't cold, my fingers trembled. The magazine grew damp with sweat. The pages slipped from between my fingers. They fell silently onto the carpet. I didn't pick it up. I just stood there, holding my breath. It was happening again, but this time I will end it my way. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Violet. Can't wait to show you my vision for our day. Our day. The words made my stomach turn. I wanted to scream, to burst through that door and tell them exactly what I thought. But my therapist's voice echoed in my mind. Naomi, you shut down when confronted. That's your survival mechanism. She was right. I'd been shutting down since I was 10 years old. I remembered the exact moment it started. My birthday party. 12 kids. 1 cake. Violet walked in late, crying about her boyfriend. Within minutes, Mom had redirected all attention to her. Let's sing to Violet too. She needs cheering up. The candles on my cake melted while everyone comforted my sister. I never made a wish that year. I learned a lesson that day. My needs were negotiable. Hers never were. Standing in that hallway, I could still smell the wax from those melted candles. But something was different now. My hand wasn't just shaking from fear anymore. It was shaking from something else. Something that had been building for 15 years. Rage. Pure, crystallized rage. Not the hot, explosive kind. The cold, calculating kind. The kind that plans, that document, that wins. If you stay until the end, you'll witness an unimaginable twist. If you were in her position, what would you do? I stood frozen in the hallway, one hand pressed against the wall, the other clutching a wedding magazine. Beyond the slightly open dining room door, laughter and conversation drifted out. She'll pay for everything, just like she did for the first wedding. When my sister Violet got married the first time, I covered most of the costs. Dad said, "It's only natural to help the family." Mom smiled and said, "Sisters are so wonderful." No one meant any harm. But that word, natural, slowly stole my future. One piece at a time. Violet's high-pitched voice cut through the air. That's what little sisters are for, isn't it? My parents' laughter joined hers. Pain shot through my stomach. The air in the room grew heavy. Their laughter sounded soft, but their words were sharp blades, cutting precisely into my chest. It was as if the entire family had trained themselves to ignore my existence. I wasn't supposed to be home for another hour. My marketing meeting ended early. I thought I'd surprise them with a visit, but I was the one who got surprised. My name is Naomi Rains. I'm a 32-year-old accountant. I work with numbers, evidence over emotion, records over tears. That was my creed. But in front of my family, logic always lost its power. When I stood before them, the 10-year-old me still trembled deep inside. But I'm not that child anymore. I now have the skills to set things right. I already told everyone. It's a joint celebration. Mom's voice bubbled with excitement. 5 years is such a special milestone. Dad made a sound in his throat. Naomi's wedding and Violet's anniversary. What could be better than celebrating together as a family? The pages slipped from my fingers. They fell silently onto the carpet. It was open to a page showing a pure white dress and a smiling bride. Just minutes ago, I had gazed at that photo with longing. Now it looked like someone else's distant story. I didn't even try to pick it up. My body wouldn't move. My breathing became shallow. My nails dug into the handle of my handbag, hiding my trembling hands. 5 years of therapy had taught me about self-worth, but in just a few seconds, it vanished like fog. I was back to that time again. My 10th birthday, when my sister opened my present and laughed, saying, "Sharing is wonderful." Even then, I couldn't say anything. I smiled and said, "Thank you," while listening to the sound of her tearing the wrapping paper. The adults applauded. Mom said with satisfaction, "Sisters are so lovely." In that moment, I quietly disappeared inside. That feeling of humiliation, burning deep in my chest. That laughter still echoes in my ears. I couldn't say anything, because I knew if I did, they'd call me selfish. I backed away silently, then stepped outside. The winter air was cold. My lungs felt brittle. I got in my car. I sank into the seat, seeing nothing. The keys were in my hand, but I couldn't start the engine. In the silence, I heard only the ticking of a clock. 3 deep breaths. I traced my smartphone with my fingertips. I touched Robert's name. Before pressing the call button, I whispered to myself just once, I won't let them control me anymore. Hey, Rob. They're doing it again. My voice was calmer than I expected, but this time I won't lose. The cold air stabbed at my lungs, but the small flame in my chest didn't go out. It wasn't anger. It was an awakening. This time, I'm taking back my life. The moment I whispered those words to myself, my tears had already dried. 5 years ago, Violet announced her engagement shortly before I graduated from college. 2 weeks later, Dad called me into his study. Thomas lost his job. We're a little short on wedding costs. Thomas, Violet's fiancé at the time, who would later become her husband. I barely knew him, but my family already treated him like one of us. Dad said, we have to help each other since he'll be our son-in-law. Mom smiled and said, for the family's happiness. My will never existed in their circle of family. I didn't understand how much weight that word little carried. It's only natural to help the family, isn't it? Dad said. Mom stood by the door with her arms crossed. If you truly love your sister, she said. I handed over my savings passbook. $15,000. My education fund. My future. You'll be fine if you take just 1 semester off, Mom said. But 3 semesters passed, and I still couldn't go back. I worked 2 jobs. I came home on the last train every day. My fingers trembled with exhaustion. Still, my parents said, how admirable that you're working hard for your sister. And I mistook that for pride. On Violet's wedding day, I stood beside the reception desk, staring at her wedding dress. The fabric sparkled under the chandelier lights. It cost more than my car. The MC added words about sisterly bonds. Applause filled the venue. The hem of Violet's wedding dress swayed across the floor. That whiteness looked like it was built on my sacrifice. In the applause and music, I felt myself becoming invisible. I smiled, with a strained smile. At that moment, something small broke deep inside me. That night, the song playing at the venue was Sisters by Rosemary Clooney. Ironically perfect background music. At that moment, I made a vow to myself. I would never let this happen again. But now, the same pattern appeared before me again. Violet wants it. My parents nod. I become the sacrifice. Like watching a replay of a play I'd seen years before. But this time, I would change the script. I stared at my smartphone. I breathed in quietly. Robert's gentle voice came through the phone. Do it your way. You don't have to endure anymore. Those words lit a small fire in my chest. I wouldn't stay silent anymore. I would fight, calmly, strategically, and I would end everything. Every time I remembered that night, my chest felt rough. No one was trying to hurt me. They just naturally called my efforts sharing. They twisted my sacrifice into family love. I couldn't see that gentle violence for a long time, but now it's different. A quiet anger warmed my blood. I wanted to tell my past self, you don't have to stay silent anymore. Mom called 2 weeks after that night. How about we all have dinner together? It's been a while. Her voice was softer than usual, as if nothing had happened. That calmness made my chest feel rough instead. On the table sat dishes symbolizing family bonds. Roast beef, gratin, and those white ceramic plates. Before special talks, these always appeared. As expected, Mom took a sip of her after-dinner tea and began. I have a wonderful idea. Let's celebrate Naomi's wedding together with Violet's 5th anniversary. The moment I heard those words, a fork scraped against a plate. Under the table, Robert's hand searched for mine. His fingers gently overlapped with mine. My shoulders relaxed just a little. It'll be more spectacular than doing them separately. And we can show family unity, right? Mom's voice grew heated. Plus, it's more efficient cost-wise to combine them. Dad nodded. My sister Violet pulled out a thick folder from her bag. I already made a list. Inside were items organized with colorful sticky notes. Catering, flowers, sound system, dresses sister pair. Dresses? I couldn't believe my eyes. Violet's mouth twisted. Look, sisters wearing the same brand will photograph better. If we match it to my Vera Wang design, it'll be unified. At that moment, the conversation froze. Robert's finger twitched in my hand, but I said nothing. If I spoke, I'd be pulled into their game. What do you think, Naomi? Mom asked without breaking her smile. Her gaze was pressure itself, masked as kindness. Let me think about it. The moment those words left my mouth, the air in the room grew slightly rough. Dad's smile paused for a second. Mom's eyelashes trembled. Violet bit the edge of her lipstick. Think? About what? Dad laughed it off. Naomi's always practical. We can trust her with budget management. I just nodded. In front of them, both objection and silence were treated as rebellion. So what I chose was observation. Defense in the form of silence. Even after the laughter faded, its echo remained in my ears. No one spoke with malice. Yet the air in the room shut me out. The round table is called family. When did I lose the right to sit at its center? Dad's words. It's only natural to help the family, circled in my mind like a spell. Each time I helped someone, I lost a little more of myself. I was finally beginning to understand that fact calmly. Silence is not submission. It's time for observation, to read their next move. I held my breath and forced a smile. After we got home, Robert pulled me close. I could tell from your eyes. That was an act, wasn't it? Yes, I want to see what they're planning. I wanted an excuse to go back to my parents' house. When Mom sent a short message saying, "Come pick up something you forgot," I saw my chance. I drove there early in the afternoon. After confirming they'd left for grocery shopping, I quietly entered the house. On the living room table sat Mom's tablet and a laptop, slightly open and left unattended. The careless habits of my parents that hadn't changed over the years would unlock the door for me. I held up my smartphone as if framing a camera shot. Then I glanced at the laptop screen. In the upper left of the desktop, I saw a shortcut to a cloud drive labeled Family Share. I'd seen Mom toss travel photos and receipts in there many times. The account's automatic login must still be active. The laptop was already connected to our family's shared drive. I gently operated the screen. I opened Family Share. The folder list showed categories like events, receipts, payment management. Among them, a file name caught my eye. Payment management _Naomi.xlsx. The file's last modified date was 3 days ago. The creator was Mom's email address. I steadied my breathing. Right-clicked the file. Selected Copy. Then dragged it to an encrypted folder I'd prepared on my USB drive. My hand trembled as I dragged, but the progress bar on screen moved calmly. After saving the file locally, I opened it. Color-coded Excel sheets lined up in rows. Venue, catering, photography, dresses, items and amounts, each with attached notes. I stared at the spreadsheet. My name appeared 37 times. I counted. Twice. Naomi, deposit. Naomi, final payment. Naomi, photographer upgrade per Violet's request. Naomi, premium flowers B insists on peonies. Each line item is a small theft of my future. The total at the bottom made my vision blur. $63,000. That was more than I made in a year after taxes. More than my car was worth. Nearly half of what I'd saved for a down payment on my first home. But it was the comments that broke something inside me. Cell B47. Don't worry. And never says no. Cell D52. She owes us anyway after the red wine incident. The red wine incident. They were still holding that over me. 5 years later. A dress that got cleaned and worn anyway. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped the laptop. I thought of every double shift I'd worked, every family discount I'd given them on my accounting services, every birthday where I'd received a card but Violet got a vacation. They hadn't just planned to use me. They'd budgeted for my compliance. I took one more screenshot, then another, then another. My phone's storage is filled with evidence. Each image is a nail in the coffin of the family I thought I had. When I finally stood up, my legs felt weak. But my resolve had never been stronger. I whispered to the empty room, "You calculated wrong. You forgot I'm an accountant too. And I'm better at this than you are." When I opened the cell comments, a brief exchange history between Mom and Violet popped out. On another tab of the sheet was a column titled Payment Plan. It stated Naomi is in charge of payments. In the bottom right of the document was a log showing who last edited it. Violet's name and timestamp blinked. The evidence was right in front of me. I took screenshots of the entire screen. I saved a print screen of each tab's metadata, just to be safe. I opened the file properties. I checked the creation date, last modifier, and shared link history, then added more screenshots. As an extra precaution, I uploaded the same file to my cloud's private evidence folder, making sure access history would be recorded. This way, even if they later said, "You copied this without permission," I'd have documentation to prove legitimacy. After finishing the work, I restored the laptop to its original state. I performed light operations to avoid leaving shortcuts or history. Then I left. Outside, cold air entered my chest. My hands trembling subsided immediately. In the car, I messaged Robert. Found payment management _Naomi.xlsx copy complete. Sending you screenshots. The moment I pressed send, I felt my resolve solidify. The plan was now in motion. From the day after obtaining the evidence, daily life became strangely quiet. Between work tasks, I carried printed spreadsheets and screenshots in my bag. Backup copies. Backup paper. Having visible backing made me feel like something was starting to work calmly. Robert moved matter-of-factly. He was a man trained in corporate budget management. He didn't get swept up in emotions. He reliably built the next move. Emily, a friend who worked at a law firm, also helped. She explained concisely. If a contract was established with just your parents' signatures, legal liability rests with the signers. Her words were cold, but to me, they looked like the outline of hope. We devised a strategy. First, not a public confrontation, but establishing formal responsibility. Shaming my parents wasn't the goal. Before their side could claim, there was consent, or it was a decoy plan. We would clarify the contradictions between records and contracts. We would make payment obligation visible. That was our winning strategy. Still, my emotions weren't completely unmoved. Mom and Dad's faces. Violet's triumphant smile. That red stain at the boutique. From time to time, they flashed through my mind like dark images. It was the day I tried on dresses 5 years ago. I'd only spilled a little juice from my paper cup onto my sister's wedding dress. The red stain was small. It could have been wiped off immediately. But Violet screamed and cried. Mom blamed me for ruining everything. Since then, I've lived holding my breath in front of my family. But that became fuel. Not burning anger, but fuel for cool determination. I wrote in my strategy notebook. I divided time and place into fine details. Rosewood Manor, a white stone mansion standing by the lake. Violet insisted it had prestige and photographed well. My parents agreed. At first, I nodded quietly, but when I actually looked at the website, my chest felt rough at its extravagance. Light reflecting through stained glass. Meticulously maintained gardens. Everything was too perfect. Placing the word family there felt far too false. Still, I had to visit to gather evidence. On the day of the Rosewood Manor preview, the air was crystal clear. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling sparkling. Through the windows stretched manicured gardens. The venue offered multiple careful explanations, then presented the contract, standard payment terms, cancellation policy, signature lines. Dad moved his pen cheerfully. Mom laughed proudly. Violet flipped pages without looking at me, sticking on post-it notes. Her movements were filled with confidence, as if the world was already complete. I quietly checked each item. Venue price list, additional options, payment deadlines, and the most important section, where legal liability by signature resided. As Emily had explained, billing rights rest with the signer. If my parents signed and I only stamped, the burden would remain with them. But they would wage psychological warfare to get my approval by asking me to please help, getting verbal consent only. That was their usual tactic. As the scene progressed, the calculations I'd prepared inside turned into certainty. Violet's prepared list contained detailed instructions. Different cake, special dance, match my wedding colors, all staging centered on herself. It was clearly a Violet-led design. In the margin of the memo was a small handwritten note. Naomi in charge of payments. A piece of evidence was solidifying into a certain mass in my hand. At that moment, Dad laughed heartily. Well then, let's put down the deposit. Once today's done, we can relax. Robert beside me lightly pressed my knee. A signal. His eyes said, "No." I quietly stood up. I pulled out a copy of the contract I'd prepared from my bag. My expression was calm. No trembling. "Excuse me, I need to confirm one thing," I said. "In the contract terms, please specify the payment obligor. I'd like both parties' signatures and written documentation of payment responsibility on record." The venue representative looked surprised for a moment, but maintained a professional demeanor. "Normally," she began to explain, but my voice stopped her. "In writing, please, just to be safe," I added. Dad frowned. Mom couldn't hide her irritation. Violet clicked her tongue. Their displeased reactions rang a small victory bell inside me. When the venue manager left to revise part of the contract, Dad glared at me with displeasure. "Such details can wait until later," he said, but his voice wavered, lacking conviction. Mom whispered, "Naomi, making trouble isn't good." But to me, that whisper sounded like her anxiety. While the manager was away revising the contract, Violet leaned close to me. Her perfume was overwhelming, the same scent she'd worn to her first wedding. "You're embarrassing yourself," she hissed. "Everyone knows you can't afford a wedding like this on your own." Her words were quiet enough that only I could hear. "That's why families help each other. Right, Naomi?" The way she said my name. Like it was a joke. Like I was a joke. I met her eyes. Really looked at her for the first time in years. I saw it then. She wasn't just thoughtless or spoiled. She knew exactly what she was doing. She'd always known. This wasn't about money. It was about power. About keeping me in my place. I smiled. The same smile I'd given her for 15 years. But this time, it meant something different. "You're absolutely right, Violet. Families should help each other. That's why Mom and Dad are signing today, as the primary financial obligors. Just like a real family would." Her face went white. In the end, the representative prepared an amendment clarifying payment responsibility location prior to signature. I read it. I added my understanding with a pen. Then I returned to my seat. When Dad and Mom were about to sign, I said, "Before you sign, just to be safe, I'll have my lawyer review this language too. I'll contact them right away." With that one sentence, Dad's pen stopped for a moment. Violet's face turned bright red. The surrounding air froze. When we returned to the car, the window outside was stained with sunset, red from traffic lights and white from street lamps mixed. The world slowly sank into night. I took a deep breath. I closed my eyes. I never thought a single signature confirmation could be such an act of reclaiming myself. The me who only knew how to obey was now certainly beginning to change. A quiet revolution could happen without raising one's voice. As we left the venue, I exhaled deeply. Cold outside air filled my lungs. The heat behind my eyes subsided. Robert put his arm around me. He whispered, "Well done," seeing the faint pride at the corner of his mouth. I could finally be honestly proud of my actions too. That night, we made final adjustments to the strategy. Emily's document checklist, notes for each contract clause, even legal procedures for worst-case scenarios. Everything calmly organized. This wasn't just revenge. It was a blueprint for self-defense. As I looked down at the pages, I realized anew how much I'd prepared. But their counterattack came quickly. The next morning, an email arrived from Mom. Subject: Notice to the family. The text stated facts already communicated to relatives and friends, and plans for a photo presentation where I, Naomi, would appear as a surprise guest. Violet had also contacted friends, further finalizing sound and food arrangements for the day. They pretended not to be upset, but accelerated toward an even bigger plan. But there was no more fear on my back. I had evidence. I had a plan. We moved to the next phase. We prepared a fake stage. We'd let them dance on that stage. Robert secured a small chapel by the lake. He contacted my friends. Outwardly, it was just a small pre-event gathering. But in reality, it was the real thing. Our true ceremony. Guests were instructed to act in 15-minute intervals. Photographers were strategically positioned. We devised a strategy to split one event into 2 streams. Rosewood on the surface was their stage. The lakeside ceremony was the fruition of our justice. The night we finished planning, I sat alone by the window. Distant street lamps glowed faintly. The lake's surface quietly reflected light. In my hand was a printout of Mom and Violet's emails, and the output of payment management _Naomi.xlsx, numbers and handwritten notes. Email phrases lined up. In cold ink, they showed the path to my freedom. Anger only colored my judgment like a guideline. In the end, cold evidence and planning would win. I carved that into my heart. In the deep night room, the low sound of a printer echoed. The smell of printed paper. The heat of the toner. Quiet clicking sounds. These gave shape to reality. I was saved by those sounds. Anger and fear had no form. But the paper was different. Cold strings of characters became support for my heart. Once I passed this night, I could finally return to myself. The next morning, as procedures at Rosewood progressed, I repeated one phrase in my mind. This isn't punishment. This is the consequence. Cause and effect revolve. What I paid has a price. To show that, I quietly gripped my pen. A few days after the meeting at Rosewood Manor, the air changed heavily. Every time an email notification rang, my chest stirred. Mom and Violet kept sending new instructions as if nothing had happened. White-themed flowers. Let's play the music from last time. Anniversary dance goes first. It was Violet's anniversary reenactment, disguised as Naomi's wedding. I didn't reply. If I replied, they'd consider it approval again. Silence was my shield. At night, the light in Robert's room was soft. Outside wind swayed the curtains. He looked at me with documents spread out. Your family is still trying to use you to build their stage. Yes, but this time we're the scriptwriters behind the scenes. My voice was low and quiet. He smiled. Then shall we switch the script? That night, we created a single sheet of paper, titled Decoy Plan. A detailed process chart, schedule, location, ceremony surface structure, evidence disclosure timing. Each item had a plan down to precise minutes and seconds. Robert said, "This isn't about winning. It's about taking back." He held my hand. The warmth of that palm was more real than any words. That day, I gripped the car's steering wheel, waiting for the signal to turn red. Outside the window, a passing parent and child walked laughing. The mother pulled the child's hand, pointed at something and talked. Watching that peaceful scene, a dull pain spread in my chest. I once believed in that warmth too, but now I feared being touched by that hand. If that person spoke kind words to me, I might waver again. Though I rationally tried to separate, the remnant of being a daughter deep in my heart hadn't completely disappeared. Still, I couldn't stop. I didn't prepare this far to beg for love now. I gripped the steering wheel again. I quietly told my heart, this fight isn't to destroy the family. It's to protect myself. No matter what anyone says, I won't go back. Moving forward is the only forgiveness left to me. The following week, I met Mom again. A cafe terrace seat. Afternoon sunlight. She wore a smile. She turned her cup with her fingertips. Really, everyone would have been in trouble without you. That voice had a tone of possession, not gratitude. I just nodded, said nothing. Mom continued, but don't worry. All the money matters are organized. You just focus on the ceremony and relax. Hearing those words, I laughed quietly. Relax. That was always the name of the chains they gave me. After returning home, I opened the shared drive again. A new file had been added to the folder. Payment Management Final Version .xlsx. When I opened it, the payment amount line had Naomi confirmed written in red. Of course, I'd never confirmed anything. As evidence of tampering, I immediately saved that screen, then forwarded it to Emily. Her reply was short but powerful. Perfect. Let's bring in a notary next. The plan progressed quietly but surely. My sister kept posting on social media, with glamorous smiles and tags saying 1 week until joint wedding. In the comment section, friends' blessings lined up. I stared at those posts, wrapped in a feeling like watching someone else's story. Her happiness was built on my sacrifice, and now it was about to crumble with a sound. The night before the wedding, I stood in a small chapel by the lake. Night wind brushed my hair. In the silence, wave sounds mixed in. Robert turned on lights. He adjusted the flower arch. There was no one's pretense, only colors and scents we'd chosen. White and blue, colors of quiet vows. I took a deep breath. I whispered small in my chest, "This is our true ceremony." Robert stood beside me. "They still think they're the stars. It's fine. I don't need them to perform anymore." I pointed to the camera. "Keep all this footage, so when they arrive at the venue, the difference is clear at a glance." Robert nodded. After filming finished, we saved the video as private. We scheduled the publication time to match the joint ceremony reception start. We packed up equipment. We embraced briefly in the previous night's silence. The next morning, I got ready early. I checked the scheduled publication time. Just then, Mom's phone call came. "Where are you?" "The staff is already at the venue." "Don't worry. The ceremony is happening." "What?" On the other end of the phone, Mom's voice wavered. At publication time, a notification rang. Our ceremony video was published on social media as scheduled. Lake Light. Robert laughing. And me. The tag had just one word: "Bow to freedom." That afternoon, chaos erupted at Rosewood Manor. Violet raged. Mom pressed the staff. Dad stayed silent and said nothing. The venue representative presented the contract copy, explained the written payment responsibility. The signatures recorded there were Mom's and Dad's, not mine. Mom's face turned pale. Violet's lips trembled. Photos of our ceremony spread instantly. The phrase, "Sisterly bonds," was now spoken not as irony, but as proof of my liberation. Friends sent messages. Emily only replied, "Done." I sat by the window, gazed at the sunset, breathed deeply. Beyond the lake's surface, light reflections swayed gently. All sounds seemed to flow far away. Suddenly I looked at the desk. A receipt lay there. Framed, it showed the dress cost, $6,000, including my sister's dress cost. The total payment was $63,000. Of that, I only paid the deposit of $6,000. That included part of my sister's dress cost too. I knew it was unreasonable, but I wanted to end it with this. Past relationships. Guilt. I would settle everything with this one payment. Not for them, but for my future. I stared at it and smiled. It was no longer a bill. It was proof I bought back my freedom. I stood up quietly. Robert called from behind. "It's over." "No, it's beginning." Finally, my story started here. Leaving the cage called family. Finally breathing in a world where I was called by my own name. Wind swayed the curtains. Light poured in. It was a morning as gentle as forgiveness. The morning after the ceremony. The lake surface was calm as a mirror. The afterglow of the previous night still lingered in the air. The scent of flower petals faintly drifted. When I woke, I lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling, as if confirming yesterday's events weren't a dream. My smartphone had several notifications. Unread messages from Mom. Call history from Violet. The social media comment section overflowed with words like "truly beautiful," "a ceremony so like you." That post made me cry. I read them one by one. There was no more fear or anger. Only the quiet afterglow of liberation remained. Robert brought coffee from the kitchen. "Good morning. Today's a good day too." That voice soaked gently into my chest. He didn't turn on the TV, didn't open the newspaper, just held out the cup. Outside light passed through white curtains and wrapped the room. Yesterday's commotion seemed like a distant world's events. When I opened my mailbox, a report from Emily had arrived. Subject: final confirmation complete. The body had a brief, well-organized sentence. The signatory listed in the contract's obligor section is not you. Legally, no payment obligation exists. Please rest assured. I let out a small breath. It wasn't the realization of victory. It was a relief at finally being able to breathe. That afternoon, I walked alone by the lake. Clouds reflected on the water surface. Wind created ripples. At my feet remained some of yesterday's flower petals. I picked up one. I held it to the light with my fingertips. The thinness of the petals reminded me of my heart all these years. For many years, crushed by the weight called family. Behind my smile, I kept choosing silence. But not anymore. I could walk my own life without anyone's approval. About 2 weeks later, an envelope was placed at my door. Mom's handwriting. When I opened it, a short letter was inside. It may take time to understand the path you've chosen, but as your mother, all I wish is for you to be happy. Tears didn't come. I just held the paper to my chest, quietly closed my eyes. I didn't know how sincere those words were, but I felt that was okay. People can change, even if it's late, even if little by little. In the evening, Robert and I hung the framed receipt on the wall. In the white frame, numbers glowed golden in the sunset. "This isn't just paper," he said. "Right. The certificate of buying back freedom that day." As I said that and laughed, warmth finally spread in my chest. Not revenge temperature, but regeneration temperature. Not anger, but the afterglow of forgiveness. At night, when I opened the curtains, the moon had risen high. The water surface glowed silver. Wind swayed the grass. Robert gently embraced me from behind. "What do you want to do from now?" "I want to help someone with my own power. People who, like me, are about to be crushed by family." When I answered that, he held me a little tighter. The next morning, I opened a new notebook. The words I wrote on the first page were just one line. "My life begins with my name." Outside the window, morning wind swayed the trees. Birdsong overlapped in the distance. Light fell on the floor through gaps in the curtains. The water surface in the vase on the desk trembled slightly with the wind. That tremor seemed to announce the beginning of new time. I put down my pen. I breathed in deeply. In the air, yesterday's heaviness was gone. Only the transparent morning scent remained. Someone rang a bell in the distant town. That sound flowed in through the window, dissolved into the silence. I smiled. I closed the notebook. The world was still moving. This time, on my feet. Light poured in through the window. A white flower swayed in the vase on the desk. A quiet morning with no one's shadow cast. In my palm, freedom was still warm. She overcame the past and took a new step forward. Do you know someone around you who recovered from an unreasonable situation? Share this story and deliver courage to someone.